It was one of the few stories that I couldn't help but dive into a bit over the holiday weekend, even though I really tried to be on a little R&R in Montana, and instead, well, I will say I had great barbecue out there, great barbecue in Montana. So your move, North Carolina, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. A lovely place. Okay, I couldn't help but see though this story, and I know that it's still going because this is now a narrative. They've created a story. They've created a storyline that now they can use. It's for a purpose. The lib anti-Trump media does this as activists. They don't do this because they're journalists. But here's the basics. I'm sure you might have heard of this. We're going to dive into this together, though. It's published in The Atlantic, which is a left-wing opinion journal that is only slightly more read than, say, the New Republic, which I think now probably counts its subscribers in the triple digits. But The Atlantic thinks of itself as fancy. It's got a lot of smug jerks who write for it. I know some of them. And here's the article written by Jeffrey Goldberg, a big lib, no surprise. Trump, Americans who died in war are losers and suckers. And the president has repeatedly disparaged the intelligence of service members and asked that wounded veterans be kept out of military parades, multiple sources tell The Atlantic. Now, since that was published on September 3rd, right, and this was meant over the holiday weekend, this was all timed, it was all coordinated, send everybody off on the holiday weekend thinking, wow, or at least anyone who reads this and believes it, wow, Trump said that about our military? Trump is that disrespectful to our wounded veterans? Oh, gosh, I don't know if I could vote for this guy. Here's the problem with it. And I'm going to get into the sourcing and the mechanics of why this is a propagandistic lie in a second. But before that, the problem that is very obvious to anybody who's being honest as they read this story is if there is one group of people on earth that it's pretty clear Donald Trump supports and thinks are worthy of respect, it is combat veterans. Now, what the libs do is find someone who either served in combat or someone who will attack the president from behind the shield of, oh, I lost a family member in war, so therefore you have to listen to me, and then claim because the president will attack that person, because he's a counterpuncher, he will fight back, because the president will not stand there and just take the abuse. As a result, because of that, they will say he doesn't like the military, he doesn't support the military, because he said it to this one person. All right. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I think Democrats are insane. I have Democrat friends. Doesn't mean I hate all Democrats, because obviously I'm not talking about all Democrats, but, generally speaking, I think Democrats are nuts, right? The president thinks that the military is awesome and has nothing but respect for it. He just finds, so it's just kind of the opposite of what I view as the political truth of knowing Democrats as individuals versus the whole party. Trump loves the military, but there are some individuals who serve in the military who are jerks, particularly generals. A lot of 3 and 4 stars that you meet, not very impressive, very political. They're really just politicians in a military uniform. A lot of them didn't really serve in any serious risk or combat themselves. That's also very common. So we elevate them. Oh, the guy's got 4 stars. He must really be incredible. Look, I've said it for a long I know people that say they really love Mattis. I've never understood. To me, it seems like a media creation, which is also what I felt was the truth of General Petraeus. And that was definitely true. And when we figured out who that guy really was, everyone goes, oh, wow, it was a media creation. Genius General Petraeus. General Mattis has said things about Trump that are just boneheaded. He said stupid stuff about the president. Why am I supposed to be so impressed by him? Because the media tells me. Mad Dog Mattis and all this stuff. I don't know. You see the guy talking about any issue, and you think, what am I supposed to be so impressed here by? Now, I know I've had some people who served who have reached out to me and said Mattis is a great general, Buck. I'm telling you, and that may be true. I'm just saying, I haven't seen it, and I don't think that we should I don't think we do live in a country where just because someone served, And then the Democrats like that person, right? Because it doesn't apply to, say, General Flynn, right? It doesn't apply to people the Democrats don't like. Because someone's serving they're a Democrat, they're allowed to go around bludgeoning everybody who disagrees with them politically with that service. I mean, the libs love to do this. They'll even have a few writers, authors, pundit types out there now. They'll find somebody who happens to be a Democrat who served, and that person's whole job is to run around and say, "Oh, I served, you didn't," to every Republican who has an opinion on war who didn't also serve. This is one of their favorite ploys, to create messengers who have a status that does not allow them to be criticized, or a status of a victim that also does not allow them to be criticized. Democrats love to do that. But let's focus back in here on Trump saying, allegedly. Look, it's BS, folks. All right, I mean, I don't even want to use terms like allegedly. It's so obviously false. There are things that you could say the president might have said in confidence or in a moment of anger. There are things that I'm sure the president might have said that if I knew about, if I heard about, I would say to myself, wow, that was, come on, that's in poor taste. There's no question about that. I don't agree with everything President Trump says. I don't agree with every move he makes. That's clear from this show. I'm not going to be somebody who just says that everything that this man does is fantastic. There are other people who do that, on other radio shows, other folks out there. But this is just not a reasonable point of criticism for this president. There's just no way. It's just not possible. I mean, this isn't, I want to say it's not possible. It's not believable. But here's what you need to know. The lib media propaganda war is in full swing. They will say anything about Trump, absolutely anything. In fact, journalists believe that lying to help defeat him in this election is the ethical thing to do. It's disgusting. But this is where we are. Lying is ethical. That's the journalist approach to Trump. Whatever you do to take this guy down is inherently justified. Doesn't that make so much more sense of all of this now? Doesn't that all of a sudden explain everything that we need to know? I certainly think so. All right, I certainly think that alone tells you the likelihood of this being real, this being a true statement. But then they did the usual journo tricks here, like having no named sources, all unnamed sources. You don't get to know. The public doesn't get to know who said the president said this. Meanwhile, there are quite a few on-the-record sources, including John Bolton, who hates the president's guts, who was there, right? This was all about, really the center of this is whether the president said this when he was supposed to go to a memorial service for slain service members in France, and he didn't go because of weather. He's supposed to fly in a helicopter, couldn't go because of the weather, and they have now turned around and said he didn't go basically because he thinks that people who die in war are losers. This is absurd. Trump respects our Marines. He respects, our infantrymen. He respects our airmen. He respects our SEALs. He respects our submariners. I mean, Trump is a guy who thinks all that is really cool and really worthwhile and really awesome. Anybody who spent any time around him knows this. But the journos run with this storyline that he's, a bad guy. The journos run with this storyline that he actually hates all of them. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. You have to remember that. If the sources, the unnamed sources behind all this came out and said, you know what, we made it all up, journalists would be a little bit upset at their reputational hit they would take. But they wouldn't be upset about defaming Trump. No, and they think defaming Trump is entirely justified. They think it's completely worthwhile. They have no problem with it at all. And then they also have to deal with the issue of the on-the-record sources. White House Press Secretary Kelly McEnany spoke to this. Play 5.
Well, I've heard from enough people. I've heard, in fact, from 19 on-the-record sources who put their names on their testimony. And those 19 sources, more than a dozen of which have first-hand accounts, have dismissed this, said it is fundamentally untrue. You have a liberal activist publication in The Atlantic proffering these absolute lies about President Trump. And again, anonymous, cowardly anonymous sources won't put their name on their allegations, but you have now almost 20 people putting their names on this and saying that this is fundamentally untrue. And this president loves our veterans. I see it each and every day. He deeply cares about our military, and this is Democrats trying to wedge veterans away from a president that has done more for them than any president in the history of our country.
The libs are desperate, you see. They're desperate. We're coming out of this pandemic, and increasingly it's obvious to anyone who really looks at it that the most extreme lockdown advocates were wrong, and wrong again. Really no benefit from it at all. We've had months taken from us, months of our lives stripped from us as a nation. Going on really now, we're going to be at a year before you can even blink an eye. It's going to happen very quickly. For what? Oh, because the science, because Fauci, because Dr. Fauci's out there telling you don't do this, do that. The data, the mitigation. I don't think so. Here's part of the problem. You did have a few journalists come forward. Fox News' Jennifer Griffin. She said that they had verified the claims. Play clip 7.
I think it's important to mention that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who you just heard from, was in the tank meeting at the Pentagon on July 20th, 2017, when the president berated the Pentagon four-star generals, calling them losers and dopes and babies. Quote, "You're all losers," Trump said. "You don't know how to win anymore. I wouldn't go to war with you people," Trump told the four-star generals. Addressing the room, President Trump exclaimed, "You're a bunch of dopes and babies." So when Mnuchin says he has never heard the president speak that way of the military or to generals, that's patently false. I confirmed with people who were present at the meeting the president used those exact words in the Pentagon. I also circled back with my sources this weekend who confirmed that the president did not go or did not want to go to the Ain Marne cemetery in France to honor the American war dead when he could no longer fly by helicopter, and that one of the president's favorite words, which he uses when he is angry, is loser.
That doesn't tell us anything about this story, really. Trashing four-star generals. I'll trash four-star generals all day. I'm not going to apologize for it. Some of them have been much more concerned with getting on the boards of big companies when they leave military service, or with the latest profile in Rolling Stone magazine, although look how that worked out for General McChrystal. A lib, by the way. Who knew? Betrayed by the libs around him, the lib reporters around him, who didn't care that he was a four-star general in a theater of war. They wanted to get something written in Rolling Stone that would really get the libs fired up. Yeah. Idiot cowards. But I'll criticize four stars all day for their policies and for the fact that they sit behind comfortable desks, just like analysts at Langley, just like people working in the Department of Motor Vehicles, folks. Four stars are not taking some big risks. So don't expect me to sit around and say, oh, well, because this person is really senior in the hierarchy. I'm not in the military. I don't have to show them any respect at all. So Trump, that doesn't mean anything that Trump says that some of them are babies and whiners and losers. He might be right. We were told that Petraeus was some kind of great genius. He seems like a smart enough guy, but he had some things on his mind other than winning the war in Afghanistan. We all know that much. And then to be CIA director and do what he did with classified information, appalling. Oh, but he was a four-star. Yeah, but he was a politician. You know, it's the infantryman. It's that young Marine. It's that young Army Ranger, that logistics sergeant who comes back from Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or wherever. That's the person that you buy a drink for. That's the person you say, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your service. You show them respect. Four-star generals? They're policy people. They're making decisions that affect the lives of those brave men and women who are actually over there taking the risks. It's not the same thing, Jennifer Griffin. Doesn't mean anything the president said that some of the generals are babies. He's right. Some of them are much more concerned with either getting that additional star or making sure that they get that cushy think tank work afterwards. I know this because generals come and go from the CIA where I used to work. Not always impressive. Some of them are great. Some of them are not great at all. What does COVID-19 have to do with you losing your home? Well, you see, cybercrime is up 75% since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, according to the FBI. And your home's information, your home's title, it's online. So here's what the bad guys do. They get your information, then they use a quitclaim deed to push you off and put themselves on your home's title. It's so easy. You'd be amazed how quickly the bad guys can do this. And then they stick you with the payments. Perhaps you don't even find out about this until you get a foreclosure notice on your home. Take action today to protect yourself with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com, code BUCK. That'll get you 30 free days of protection. You can also check to see at that site if you are already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection, and check to see if you're a victim.
The other thing I think we should point out, Brooke, is that the president is trying to consistently put the wool over people's eyes, pull the wool over people's eyes, that somehow he's had this amazing response to the coronavirus. He once again tried to say that the U.S. is leading the world when it comes to the coronavirus. It's only leading the world in coronavirus deaths. It's not leading in a response to the coronavirus. Other countries have far surpassed in performance in terms of getting this virus under control. And so I do think that the president is trying to put this false spin out there that somehow he's on top of this, and that's why he keeps coming back to this lie, if you want to call it that. No reporter likes to say the president of the United States is lying, but this lie that a vaccine is going to be out there available to the American people, kids are going to be lining up and getting injections in their arms and so on before Election Day. Every responsible public health expert inside the task force and outside the task force and the public health community have all said that's just not going to happen.
I love when Jim Acosta can't even get through a lie about President Trump without lying some more. In this case, he's saying his lie, Acosta's lie, is that no reporter likes to say the president is lying. And he just says, it just filters in. It's just so, oh yeah, sure. No reporter thinks that the president of the United States is lying. It's actually not true. A lot of them like to say that. A lot of them love it. A lot of them have built careers on it. But they lie even when it comes to Trump's lying. Isn't that the most perfect thing? And that's something we all have to remember as they continue to roll out these various anti-Trump stories. And that's something that we have to remember as they pretend, right? They pretend that what's really happening in this country is they're just bringing us the information, the news that we need to make our own decisions. Anyone who believes that at this point, I don't even know what to say to them. I don't even know what claim we could make that would deal with such an absurdity at this stage. But there you go. There's a way to describe Jim Acosta. Just an absurdity beyond comprehension. That's what he is. That's what he's turned into. The journalists, as we know, are waging war against this president. They're going to do everything they can to tear him down at this very critical stage of the election process. And you should just remember that. There are very few places, it's a shame, very few places in the mainstream media where you can even expect the facts to be honestly presented anymore. The media is, from what I've seen in the most recent polling, less trusted than Donald Trump is to present facts on coronavirus, which it's fascinating because the media thinks that they're the straight shooters and Trump is always lying. No. Intelligent Americans of good judgment have figured out that journalism in this country is largely a farce, almost entirely a fraud, and you should approach it with caution.
With him, he's right on tape, and you don't want to cover it. You should be ashamed of yourselves. The press should be ashamed of themselves. With Biden, shipped away our jobs, threw open our borders, and sent our youth to fight in these crazy, endless wars. And it's one of the reasons the military, I'm not saying the military is in love with me, the soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. But we're getting out of the endless wars. You know how we're doing it. We defeated 100% of the ISIS caliphate. 100%. When I came in, it was a mess. It was all over. They have it in a certain color, all ISIS. A year later, I said, where is it? It's all gone, sir. Because of you, it's all gone. Because of my philosophy, but it's all gone.
President making it very clear that he has tremendous respect for the military, but he's really about the soldiers. And he's saying that there is, at the top of the Pentagon, it's similar to what I was telling you before, the 4 stars and 3 stars. These are not combatants, really. These are people that are politicians. They're managers. They're running a very large organization. Now, some of them, I understand, some of them are people who have served heroically in war zones and combat previously. But just because you're a general doesn't mean that everyone has to, in the rest of society, has to salute and say, yes, sir, thank you, sir. That's not how it goes. And that includes the commander-in-chief. Doesn't have to say that he thinks all of his generals are doing a great job. He's allowed to be frustrated with them. Look, the national security elites in this country, the people that are making the decisions about what countries to invade and when and how long we stay and what we do there, the so-called experts that our elected officials rely on, from think tanks all the way up to the top of the Pentagon, they have underperformed dramatically over the last 20 years. Underperformed. They've not done a very good job. We're still in Afghanistan, and we're still in Iraq. And every time the president makes a move toward ending those military commitments, those military deployments, there's someone in the Pentagon, there'll be some news story in the New York Times, oh, all the experts say collapse is imminent if this happens, and you can't do this. Isn't he the commander-in-chief? Why can't he do this? There are always risks. There are always risks to ending endless wars, but the alternative is endless war. Right? That's where we are. And people will say, oh, Buck, we're not really fighting that much in Afghanistan now. We're not fighting that much in Iraq. Yeah, but by keeping a military presence there in an unstable country where there is a large hostile insurgency against us, specifically with the Taliban in Afghanistan that controls a lot of territory, it's just a question of when we're going to have to raise our troop levels, go back, and what really are we doing there? Why do we have to be in charge of Afghanistan? Where does it say that your sons and daughters, and some of you listening to this right now yourselves, should be policing the streets of Kandahar or Jalalabad or Kabul or Helmand province or whatever? Why? No one really has a great answer, though, because there are bad people who will take charge if we leave. There are plenty of countries that are run by bad people. Why are we sending our best to go do the work that the Afghan people should be doing for themselves? And if they're incapable of doing it, that's not our problem. That's not America's role in the world. I thought we had already had a referendum of sorts on this with Trump's election. I thought it was clear that this was no longer going to be something that we took into our hands. Well, not if you allow them. If you allow them to have their way at the E-ring of the Pentagon, not if you allow the people making the decisions from inside the national security bureaucracy to steamroll common sense, which is what they tend to do. And that's what the president brings to all this. That's what President Trump shows up with. He says, hold on a second. Why are we doing this thing? No, really. I want an explanation. What are we getting from this? What are the benefits of this? What's the mission? What's the strategy? And don't give me some, it's, clear and hold and rebuild. And we've been saying that in Afghanistan for almost 20 years. Hasn't worked. It's going to work next year? Oh, no, this is just forever. This is just what we're going to keep doing without anyone ever really asking why, without anyone ever coming to the conclusion who's in power and in a position of authority to do something about it, that this is a bad idea. Oh, the journos. Oh, the lib media, when the president said this about the Pentagon wanting to continue this because there are those who benefit from the major military contractors having wars to fight, making the bombs and the planes, and there's a financial incentive here. They said, oh, how dare the president ever say such a thing? How dare he take this position? Well, this shouldn't be surprising to anybody. He's not the first president to say this. In fact, he's just continuing with a long tradition of presidents who recognize that this is a reality. Whether they did anything about it or not is another issue. But go back to Eisenhower's military-industrial complex speech. Play 4.
I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Oh my gosh, he's saying that we have to be on guard for the military-industrial complex. He actually coined the phrase. Is Eisenhower now a terrible person that nobody should ever listen to? No, in fact, that speech is commonly cited as, first of all, is the most well-known of Eisenhower's entire presidency. And people point to it and say, he saw what was coming. He saw the reality of the tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that would be changing hands as a result of wars. Look, the Republican Party learned a lesson in Iraq, my friends. We learned a lesson from the Bush, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice era, that fiasco that occurred. What were we doing? Were we prepared for what we decided to do? Why had we made that decision? But no, instead, the journalists pretend, after claiming they cared so much about all of that, right? Because it was useful as a weapon against Bush, as a weapon against the Republican Party, as a weapon against anybody who came after him and tried to stop the march of the socialist left. They abandoned that at the first opportunity, or as soon as it is opportune for them, as soon as it's convenient for them, and act like President Trump even bringing this up is beyond the pale. It's absurd. It's terrible. How could he? Well, maybe the president recognizes that there are things going on in the government that are swampy. Maybe he remembers that his promise was to do things differently, and that ultimately, as commander-in-chief, his first obligation with the decisions he makes about our military is to the security of the people of the United States, and to the greatest degree he can, he thinks in terms of what's good for the soldier, not what's good for the 4-star back at home, en route to a conference in Aspen. That's not the president's first thought process. What's Kamala Harris up to these days? Oh, the Democrats' VP pick. And some would say the soon-to-be de facto president of the United States. They'll get tired of coddling Biden once he becomes president and writing out all the cue cards for him, and we'll want to hand over more responsibilities to Kamala Harris. I really believe this. And you know that I don't go with conspiracy theories and I don't like outlandish predictions for their own sake. If Joe Biden becomes president, I don't think that he finishes out his first term. I think that he bails by the midterm. Just steps down. Gets to make tens of millions of dollars giving speeches and having other people write books for him, reading speeches other people write for him, and publishing books that other people have written for him, and gets to be a hero for the Democrat Party forever. Everyone will love him and his family and his family name Why allow yourself to get dragged into more political battles fighting against the Republicans when the left is willing to do all the fighting for you? I don't think that Joe Biden finishes his first term. I don't believe that he continues on with it. I think that anyway. But Kamala Harris then becomes president of the United States. So it's more important than it even would normally be for all of us to make a special point of digging into who is this vice president, right? Who is she? What does she stand for? You have, for one thing, this is a person who has been a district attorney for San Francisco, a state attorney general in California, and she's shown she's a political hack. I mean, she's willing to do things for the sake of politics that are clearly not about the law. And she'll even come out now and say that the officer in the Kenosha shooting should be charged. Play 24.
You believe that the officer who shot Jacob Blake should be charged. You were the district attorney in San Francisco. I'm wondering if you put yourself in the position of the DA in Kenosha and how you would feel if you got pressure from the Democratic running mate to be vice president of the United States to put criminal charges in without necessarily knowing the facts that the DA knows.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why I've been very clear. I am not in full possession of the facts of the case. But based on what I've seen, I think that charges very much should be considered and should be considered in a very serious way, and that there should be accountability and consequence.
Accountability and consequence. She doesn't know everything. She says she doesn't even know all the facts, but charge him anyway. Okay, that's the Kamala Harris school of being a prosecutor. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know everything, but charge him. Go for it. He's going to be charged because he didn't wait to see if Jacob Blake was able to get a knife and stab him with it. They held his shirt. They said stop. They said don't. They had guns drawn. Jacob Blake made a decision that the police didn't have any authority over him. And Jacob Blake suffered the consequences of that decision. There's really no surprise here. There's really no surprise. As I've told you, even if I was completely unarmed, if I am told by police to show my hands after wrestling them to the ground, so now they recognize me as a threat, somebody who is non-compliant, someone who's willing to use violence against cops, and I reach into my waistband really quickly and say, I've got a gun, and they say, show us your hands, and then I really quickly pull my hand out of my waistband like I'm going to shoot them, and they shoot me, that's on me. That's my fault. That's not on the cops. Same thing applies to walking around to your vehicle door and reaching in for a knife you have on the floorboard when you are a suspected rape suspect who has already fought with the cops on the ground. But you know what the response of the left has been to this? The same thing they always do. And it's so depressing because it's such a bunch of pandering bullcrap. The whole thing is so dishonest and so disgraceful. But they have Kamala Harris saying to Jacob Blake, quote, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, she says, to this man who allegedly digitally raped a woman with her child in the room, from the police report. Third-degree sexual assault, criminal trespassing. And that's what we know of Jacob Blake. Does anyone really think he's gonna beat those charges? Doesn't seem like it. Guy doesn't seem like he cares very much about the law at all. But Senator Harris spoke to Jacob Blake and said she is proud of him. Here's the trial lawyer for him for Blake put this out. Senator Harris had an inspirational and uplifting 1-hour visit with Jacob Blake Jr. and his family. Here we go. Here. In a moving moment, Jacob Jr. told Senator Harris he was proud of her, and the senator told Jacob she was also proud of him and how he's working through his pain. Why exactly is Kamala Harris proud of him? Let's really ask the question. What is she proud of here? What did this guy do to deserve a vice presidential candidate being proud of him? Really? Let that one simmer for a moment. Let that one just bounce around in your head. Because he may be a rapist, or at least a sexual assaulter. That's a terrible thing, right? I'm sure now that the DA is probably going to push to drop all the charges against him, as though resisting arrest and getting shot means that all the crimes you did before don't count. I don't know. That's what I would expect that to happen, because it's all political. There's a law, accountability, individual action. None of that really matters anymore. No, what's much more important is this is considered a win for Team Democrat. He's a martyr for the cause now. He's someone that they all have to pretend is a great person, an inspiration, a hero, just like they did with Mike Brown. Mike Brown was a person who was a criminal who tried to hurt a cop and got killed. And they still act like he's a martyr. Why? Well, what did he do that was a good thing? Notice they will always give more than the benefit of the doubt. They will rewrite history to create martyrs for this movement. And I think they do this in part knowing that those of us who don't buy into all this crap are even more outraged by the fact that they choose people who aren't sympathetic. They choose people who are attacking police. If you attack a cop and the cop thinks that you are a mortal threat, he or she should shoot. But they do it intentionally. They pick these cases where they make up a story, and then when the story isn't true, it doesn't matter because it's all about what their constituency is going to say. It's all about how the left will react to this. And Kamala Harris is shameless. Shameless. Doesn't really stand for anything other than what has to be said to Democrats to make them happy, so they'll vote for you, so you'll be in power. She's the classic politician in that way. Same thing with Joe Biden. You know, there are a lot of people that will criticize Trump all day long, but the truth is that President Trump beat the whole Republican field because he was willing to say things and take ideas forward that were not the establishment, that were not what was poll tested and political consultant approved. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, it's just the usual warmed over social justice, socialist, elitist crap